All right, we're going to go get started here. Again, back to Codes Out Superintendent. Again, thank you for coming out tonight. A lot of good questions, a lot of good answers, a lot of good information. We're going to go ahead and get started on our section. We do have a presentation, and then we'll do the questions from the cards. Again, I apologize if you have been to other meetings, and some of this information is going to be the same, but, you know, I think it's important to hear it multiple times because really, I don't think you really hear it fully until you've heard it 5, 6, 7 times. So we're getting close to about 5 right now. But again, this is extremely important information. So again, we're at a critical juncture here. As you know, we have outstanding, dedicated teachers, staff members, and they do a great job within our school district. Again, it's a team effort between families, community, and the teachers, and obviously the students also. But we did a survey last summer that just kind of speaks to that. And this is a statistically reliable survey. Quality of education in the survey, 91.2% had a positive rating that they thought in our community that they are getting a quality education in the school district. Also, they had to rate the work of classroom teachers. 78% had a positive rating of the classroom teachers. So when the individual that did this survey, who is not from this community, who did this survey, especially that 90%, he said those are percents that he doesn't really ever see those percents that high, that positive rating. So our teachers are respected, our staff members are respected, and they do a fantastic job. And just to speak to that also, the quality profile, so this was on the table over there. This went to every community member in the fall, and this essentially is a year in review of the school district. So if you take a look at this, it's that kind of infographic. Even there's a lot of stuff on here. There's a lot of infographics, not a lot of text on it, but you really see on this all of the great things that are going on in our school district. And these are the things that we're trying to protect right here. The things that are on this quality profile are the things that the levy is going towards. So as you're trying to think through that and trying to, when we say day-to-day operations of the school district in our information, this is the day-to-day operations of the school district right here, the quality profile, the things that are in this quality profile. If you didn't get one, there is more on the table over there, and it is also online. But again, the single most important issue facing our school district is our budget. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lyman here.
Okay, I'm Kevin Lyman, the treasurer here at the school district. Some facts about this levy. It's a 5.7 mil levy, as we mentioned earlier. The district hasn't passed millage since 2015. It is for day-to-day operations. This is not a specific purpose levy for a building or anything like that. One of the big culprits and reasons we're in this situation is that next percentage there. We only get 27% of our funding from the state of Ohio. The average in the state school district gets 44%. That is due to the fact that in the state funding formula, they take into consideration the income level of the average resident in the school district and also the property value of the average citizen in the district. In the state of Ohio, we are, I think, in the top 35 or so in those two areas. So because those levels are high, they reduce our state funding. There are only 3 major ways that school districts can get money. School income tax, we don't have one. State funding, we have very low state funding. And a property tax levy. So that's what we're faced with. It's not like we have numerous options to help solve our funding crunch right now. We've already made $2.3 million in budget reductions, and more are to come, some regardless of whether the levy passes or not, and then we will address later a list that will occur if the levy fails. It would cost a citizen $16.60 per month for 100,000 in property valuation, or right at $200 a year.
Or about 54, 55 cents a day. Depends on how you want to look at it.
We didn't do the calculation per hour.
No, we did not per hour. No.
So some other facts that you might want to know. This levy would raise about $3.3 million a year if it passed. you would not see it on your tax bill until January of 2021. The second big culprit to why we are in this situation is that next one. We have $3.6 million as the cost in 2018-19 of our underfunded and unfunded mandates. What we mean there is the state and federal government says this is what you are required by law to do, and good luck. Or they're saying we'll fund some of it. These are items, the newest one probably is College Credit Plus, where those of you that have had students in high school, you can go to college and the school district has to pay for the tuition and the books. While you're in high school, you can earn college credit. We have other things, obviously, that have been around for years. Good programs, not arguing that. Special education is very costly. Preschool is required. That seems to be growing all the time. We keep having to add a new unit. And charter schools really siphon a lot of our state funding also. Many other unfunded mandates, those are the main ones. The last thing I wanted to mention, we have been talking a lot with Mr. Graham's presentation about additional money for new construction, reappraisals, inside millage, the cornerstone development. We get questions about that stuff all the time. I'm going to show you a 5-year forecast here a little later. All the stuff that we're predicting in these areas is already built into that, and it still only amounts to about 2% of our budget. So we're glad to get all that money, but that's not solving our problem. It's not even close to taking care of what we need.
Again, just to add a few of those, so the school district has no control over new construction. The school district can't say, don't build that development, don't have that development, don't build that house. The school district has no say over it. That is township and city of Bellbrook responsibilities, and that's in their purview. The other thing, again, the unfunded, underfunded mandates. We have no say in whether we can do those or not. We have to do those. And that's up from $3 million the previous year. So that's just a one-year thing. That isn't cumulative. That is 1 year, $3.6 million. The state and the feds tell us you have to do X, Y, and Z, but we're only going to fund you at a certain portion. We're underfunding or not funding you at all for that particular item. In College Credit Plus, $92,000 last year. We, the K-12 school district, is paying for college tuition. We're paying higher ed. You guys are all paying for that. Great for families, great for kids. Okay, I'm not denying that. However, when there's something free, it's never free. Someone is always paying for that. Okay? All right.
Okay, here we have a 5-year forecast. And a couple things I wanted to say before I started this. We talked about, it was a good point someone made here earlier, we talked about the revenue from new construction. Our cost in our district, I don't have the exact number, but the cost to educate one student in our district begins with $11,500 approximately. So we get a little nervous when somebody says there's going to be a new development going in. If you get 200 homes and 2 kids in each home, you got to hire more teachers and buy more school buses and so on down the line. A lot of expenses go into that. So this is the 5-year forecast summary. Let's just look at the top row. You can see that this is the ending cash balance in our general fund for each of these years. We're good till fiscal year 22, where we're 1.8 million in the red. And if you go to fiscal year 24, we're 11.6 million in the red. Then at the bottom, if we pass the levy, those are the balances that we would have. The 5th year out there, fiscal year 24, is slightly in the red, even with the passage of a levy. That would, we would have to take care of that, obviously, with more cutbacks somewhere along the line, so that wouldn't occur. The point, though, that we want to make is that even with the passage of the levy, it's not like we're going to have large balances and we can now reinstate cutbacks we've made, or we can now buy all the big ticket items that we've been holding off on. We are still very close, even with the passage of this levy.
And really, and we'll get to this in the auditor's report, but really it's best practice to have about $3 million as a reserve. And so we're at $3 million in FY22, but then after that, we're not. And that's with the passage of the levy. So even with the passage of the levy, you want to have kind of a rainy day fund in your school district, and that's supposed to be a minimum, not a maximum. That's supposed to be a minimum. So again, as we need to put a pin in this because we'll get to phase 3 reductions, and so that's the reason why we're doing phase 3 reductions, because at the end of this 5-year forecast here, we're still at about 0 here.
One more thing before we leave that slide.
Yep.
Stay there. I wanted to say also that when we were talking about the 800,000 number for possibly, for new construction, I had built 400,000 in. So it's not like, even if that happened, that all of a sudden we could add 800,000 a year into those balances. It would be 400,000 for 1 year, and that would be great. That would get us in the black in that last year, but that doesn't mean we don't need a $3.3 million a year levy. That's the only thing that's going to be able to eliminate that $11.6 million deficit. Again, the reason for that is our very low state funding, no income tax, and it's just difficult in a district like ours to survive because there aren't any other options except property taxes and income taxes.
And so just to get some background information, I'm not going to go into as much detail as I did at the last meeting, but we have been making reductions. Again, this was in the survey from last summer, is if you come back and ask us for another levy, you need to make reductions. So we are doing that. In summer of 18, actually, before the May levy last year, we already made $500,000 in budget reductions. Then we had the 7.5 mil replacement levy on the ballot, which did not pass. And then in the next month or so there, we did phase 1 reductions, and that's about $813,000. We continue to look for additional ways to save. We saved an additional $168,000 in this summer. In July there, we worked collaboratively with Performance Audit from the State Auditor's Office, and we'll talk about that in a minute here. And we did put a levy on the November 2019 ballot. We still were looking for more reductions, and we still didn't think we had enough information out there in order for us to be successful. And so November 2019, phase 2 reductions, we made additional reductions. We made another $1 million worth of reductions. And so if you add all those together, it's $2.3 million in reductions. 20 staff members, 10 of those certified or teachers. So again, also into that were part-time mechanics, budget reductions in building and technology a few times. We also had a payroll clerk go part-time. Our manager of business went from full-time to part-time. We eliminated a custodian here at the middle school, a couple part-time cafeteria aides, 5 full-time bus drivers. We had a decrease in insurance benefits. Also for next year, when that $1 million, about $750 of that $1 million is a pay freeze for next year and no steps for next year for all staff. So that's in that $1 million. That's about $750 of that million, and then about 3 other staff members that we're not filling through attrition. So again, behind all those things, there's classes a little bigger. There are some services that aren't getting done because of that, or other people are having to work a little harder because of that, because you just can't eliminate 20 staff positions and 10 certified without that taking a toll on folks.
This is another 5-year forecast. What I wanted to point out here, 2 things. One would be the first 2 rows across total revenue and the total expenditures. If you follow those across, you'll see that the total revenue does not come close to increasing by the amount of expenditures. We did a little math. That revenue increases 1.3% per year across there, and that's with assuming no levy. The expenditures increase 4% per year, even with the cutbacks we're making. And that is because of things like insurances. Our medical insurance went up 24% this year, which is way out of whack. That never happened. I think 11 was the most I'd ever heard of before that. But that was one crazy year for that medical insurance. Utility increases, salaries, as we said, there's a freeze for the next year. Things like that are, some of those are beyond our control. The number that's circled there, the negative 1.8 million in fiscal year 22, that's what the Ohio Department of Education is currently talking to us about. We've been placed in pre-fiscal caution, which I'd never heard of before, but that is a term that fiscal caution is the first step of the state. We're in pre-fiscal caution, which means we have to come up with a plan approved by the board of how we will save another $1,893,000 or more without a levy to submit to them, so that we will not be in the red on 2 years out in the next forecast.
And so that's what's really driving our phase 3 and phase 4 reductions, and we'll get to that in a minute.
And this next one is the most important slide of the evening, so pay close attention to this one.
So this was done by the auditor's office. Ohio Auditor's Office. So this is local tax efforts. So this takes into account a community's, a school district's property wealth and income level, and then relative to that, how much are they paying in taxes? So if that number is lower, that means their tax burden is lower compared to other communities. So if you look at this, we have the lowest tax burden in this area, and Centerville and Beaver Creek are actually even higher because they passed a tax levy since this time. And so Xenia has twice as much as tax burden as we do because their income levels are not as high, their property wealth is not as high. So this is the tax burden within a school district. So I think that's important to note. And then also this next slide. So this was done by the city of Beaver Creek. This is 2018 area tax cost. So Sugar Creek Township and Bellbrook are right there, I would say at the top, but they're really at the bottom. Because when you add in real estate taxes, city income tax, and school district income tax, so this is based off a $100,000 house, $50,000 income, again, apples to apples comparison, we are the lowest in the area. Which when I show this slide, people are somewhat surprised by this because they say, my taxes are really high. Well, per $100,000 house, actually, you're the lowest in the area. Yellow Springs, as David mentioned a little bit ago, they're about $1,000 more per $100,000, and Oakwood is about $1,900 more per $100,000 house than us. So some of the reasons why the taxes are a little higher is because, especially in the township, the average house price is about $350,000. So it's because your house is a little bit bigger. So that's why obviously the taxes are a little higher. So when you take in the area tax cost, we are some of the lowest in the area. And then when you add in the tax burden, we have some of the lowest tax burden in the area. So those are just little food for thought. And then that also speaks to, we're talking about the tax costs and so forth. So the state taxes, or the state funding model. So again, we had Representative Cuppin here in December, actually in this room. He presented about this new funding proposal that the state is working on, about how to fund schools, and they hope they get it done by the end of this assembly. So that's another 1.5 years they're hoping to get this done by. So they've redone the whole model, and so right now it's based on property wealth. They've added income level in there. Well, in a community like ours, where the income level is about $110,000, that really doesn't help our community with getting more taxes from the state, or more help from the state. So, as they actually did a simulation on every school district in the entire district of how much additional money would you get from the Cupp-Patterson proposal. And so they ran that in spring, and then they ran it again in fall because they had made some changes over the summer. So additional money that we would get in year one, whenever year one is, and again, keep in mind, they haven't found out how they're paying for this yet. That I think is a key piece that they kind of kicked down the road a little bit. But year one, we'll get $160,000 more. Year two, $140,000. So even if the Cupp-Patterson state funding model goes through, we are not going to get substantially any additional money. Again, will we take $160,000, $140,000? Sure, we'll take that money. However, that is not going to decrease the need for a school levy or support at the local level. Performance audit. So we had the state auditor's office in here. They did what was called a performance audit. So they looked at our May projected forecast from last year, and then the May 2019 levy failure, and they thought that we were a good candidate for them to work in. And again, so they look at how do we get rid of this deficit without a levy. So that's kind of the lens they're looking through, because they can't assume a levy is passing. So they're trying to determine how are we going to, what expenditures can we reduce within this school district so that they can get rid of this $11.6 million deficit. So some of the things they found, they found that we were already taking proactive measures, and that was a slide from a little bit ago, that $2.3 million. They also identified 11 recommendations. In those 11 recommendations, it did not fully resolve the projected $11.6 million deficit. So they said, well, let's do recommendation 12. Recommendation 12 will save an additional $1.4 million. However, you're going to change the way your school district looks. the service levels in your school district are going to change in order for you to be able to resolve this budget deficit without the passage of a levy. So let's look at those. And also we're going to look at some other areas that were examined, but no recommendations were warranted because there's no additional savings to be found in there. Let's go with number 3 here. So number 3 is in our school district, like probably every other school district in the entire state, we fund our extracurriculars. That's sports, that's clubs, that's activities, that's department chairs, all those supplementals that are above and beyond a work day. We fund that with our general fund, which is just our regular money, our general fund money. So normally, they would say that we would get, we need to get down to our primary peers. So they compared us to primary peers. Those are school districts around the state that are similar to us financially and also academically. Around here, that would be Monroe, Tip City, Ross. Those are 3 of the local ones around here. So they compared us to them. They also compared us to local school districts. And then they compared us with the transportation piece with districts that look similar to us with transportation. So normally they would, let's say, just get down to your primary peer districts. And we're about $100,000 spending over, about $100,000 what our primary peer districts are spending. So that's something that we need to work on. And when we get to phase 3 and phase 4, we'll take a look at that. And so what they did not look at was, hold on one second. They did not recommend that we get down to our primary peers. Because primary peers were about $340,000 over. They did not recommend that. Why? Because your primary peers are those that are right around you. However, they base it on per pupil, not per athlete, per pupil. So the districts they're comparing us to per pupil, we have about 2,800 students, are Beaver Creek, 8,200 students, Centerville, 7,900 students, Kettering, 7,400 students, Wayne Local, 1,394, and then Xenia, 4,597. So if I have a basketball team and I have one basketball coach, my spending is going to be a little bit more if you do it per pupil, if my district is 2,800 kids or 8,200 kids. So that's why they did not recommend that we get down to our local peers, but our primary peers, because those are most similar to us. Some other things in here. So recommendation number 5. So they recommended eliminating a 0.5 career tech educator, 1 counselor, 1.5 nurses, and 0.5. So that doesn't mean we're overstaffed in those areas. That doesn't mean we're overspending in those areas. That doesn't mean we're overstaffed in those areas. That doesn't mean we're overspent in those areas. That means compared to our primary school districts, we're a little bit more. However, sometimes the configuration of a building can impact that. So if you have a 6 to 12 grade building, you maybe can get away with 1 nurse. But if you have a setup like we do, 6 to 8 and 9 to 12, it'd be a little more difficult for 1 nurse to be here full-time and at the high school full-time. That's a little challenging. And the increased medical needs of our students have increased. Also counseling, same kind of thing. If you have a 6 to 12 building, you might be able to get away with 1 less counselor. But our setup, a little more challenging to do that. And with the mental health needs of our students and students around the state, and the push by Governor DeWine of mental health, it's a little more challenging to get rid of a counselor. So those are things that just because these are auditors, they're facts and figures kind of people, they're just looking at facts and figures. They're not looking at what's best for our community. Okay. The other piece here, recommendation number 4, eliminating 1 technical support person and 1 central office support person. We've already eliminated that 1 technical support person. That's a curriculum technology integration specialist. So even though we're Chromebooks, K to 12, and we have a person that's helping teachers how to better integrate technology in the curriculum, unfortunately we're going to be doing away with that position. So that's just a piece of that. But we've already done that for next school year. The other piece is a 0.5 central office support staff person. So they looked at hours per day, not days per week of working. So we have a person in the treasurer's office that works 3 out of 5 days, and we have a person that is the preschool secretary and does also new enrollees. That person works 4 days a week. So that is 7/10 of a person right? Nope, they count that as 2 people. They count that as 2 people, because they count out hours per day, not days worked per week. So we're already there with that. So that's a discussion / argument that we had with them. But that's what they maintain anyway. And then another piece in here, and again, I'm not going to do this whole thing. This is all online, but recommendation number 12. So recommendation 12 is, again, recommendations 1 through 11 don't fully get rid of the deficit. So recommendation 12 is essentially eliminate 16 teachers, eliminate 10.5% across the board staffing, or eliminate or institute a pay freeze, not next school year, because next year we already have a pay freeze. This pay freeze, or the year after that, however, that still wouldn't be enough. You'd still have to eliminate another $700,000 with that. So again, recommendation 12, in their words, is it will change the service levels within the school district. So if you add all that $2.5 million in year 1 that they're recommending to do next year, they're recommending 2.5 out of next year. 2.1 of that is recommendation 12, $1.4 million, and recommendation number 3, $700,000. So 2.1 of that are those 2 recommendations. And of all those others, that's the other $400,000. All right. I think it's also extremely important to look at what are the things that they review, because they spent 6 months with us. 6 months they spent with us looking at all of our books, looking at our procedures, everything. So they spent 6 months. So they had no recommendations for salaries. They had no recommendations for medical insurance, transportation, staffing, maintenance, custodial, administrative, general ed teachers, K-8, special teachers, building, clerical, and food service. So they didn't have any recommendations for those. Just to name one of those, general ed teachers, we're actually, compared to our peers, we're actually 14 teachers under what our primary peers are. We're 14 teachers under where our primary peers are at. So even if you added in those other ones from the other page, that added up to 5 people, and we've already eliminated one of those positions. And I disagree with 0.5 of them. You're down to 3.5. And so, if you just did the general ed teachers, we're already below 14 teachers compared to our primary peer. We've already begun to work on the bus fleet replacement strategy, facilities preventive maintenance plan, multi-year capital plan, formal purchasing processes. So we were doing those things. We just didn't write them down. We didn't write them down on a piece of paper. However, bus fleet replacement strategy, we have a really good one, replace 2 a year. However, we don't have any money to replace 2 a year, so we can have the greatest plan in the world, but if you don't have any money to do that, it's not, in the end, what kind of plan is it? Here's the salary comparison review. So this is from the auditor's office, and this is an important point. They did not look at one moment in time, what is the average salary? They did not look at it. They looked at their entire salary schedule from year 1 to step 0 all the way to step 33. They looked at our whole salary schedule. And so their salary schedule is you have the steps of years of experience on one side, and then you have bachelor's 150, master's 15, master's 30, and so forth. So they looked at our entire salary schedule, and we are below all of our local peers, this time, except BA 150. Why did they do local peers? Because we are competing with our local school districts for teachers. We're not competing with school districts in Cleveland or Toledo or somewhere else like that. We need to be competitive around here. So this one, fortunately, unfortunately, it depends on how you look at it, we'll be even lower next year because we'll all be on a pay freeze for next year. Again, the other piece that we have to remember in here is, our average salary is about $71,000 or so. Why is that? Because we have, let me see if I have a figure here. We have about 15 teachers or so that under the old STRS rules, so our STRS is the state teacher retirement system. So that's, instead of paying into Social Security, we do not pay into Social Security. We pay into our state teachers retirement system. Classified support staff, they pay into the state employees retirement system. So we have our own retirement systems. So over the past few years, for that retirement system to become more stable, they've increased how much we're paying in from 10 to 14%. They said we can no longer retire with full benefits at the end of 30 years. You have to be at least 35, and you have to be at least 60 years old. And we're going to give you less benefits when you retire. So work longer, pay in more, retire, and get less in retirement. That's the new STRS changes. But what other impact that has is there's about 15 teachers under the old rules that could have retired. They could have retired at 30 years, but now they have to work longer to get to those other parameters. So that's another, we didn't include that in our unfunded mandates, but that's another unfunded mandate that the state retirement system is pushing onto every school district, not just ours, but our retirement, or our pay scales, along with everybody else's, that now you have to work longer. And obviously, those are your veteran teachers, those are the ones that make the most money, because they are at 30, 35 years. Masters plus 15, masters plus 30. These are highly educated people that are teaching your kids, and they're worth that money.
Okay, we have here a financial forecast that shows the effects if we implemented every single recommendation under this performance audit. When I say every single recommendation, we're including that number 12 that included don't pay a penny towards extracurriculars and cut another 16 teaching positions. So if we did that, we could make it through to 2024. Still though, like Dr. Kozat said, we would look a lot different around here, let's put it that way. Did want to say one other thing about these performance audits. A performance audit, in case we didn't make it clear, is not like our regular financial audit we have every year. This is an audit where they come in and they try to help us find ways where we can be more efficient, or areas where we can save money. So they are the good guys, so to speak. And when that happens, when you have a performance audit, you hope for one of two things. You either hope they're going to find some really big areas where you can save money, and that would be great. Then you kind of feel, if that happens, why weren't we doing that in the first place? They never really found anything like that. They took the other method where they didn't find much of anything, which made us feel kind of good that we were operating pretty lean to start out with, but the problem is that doesn't help us get to our deficits.
And even with these performance audit recommendations, so of changing the nature of the school district, we probably would still have to be back on the ballot, in 2021 or no later than 2022 to get that money from 2024, which is when we aren't in the red there. So even with that, you have to go back to the voters. Even with all those recommendations to get rid of that $11.6 million, you're still coming back to the voters. The state is not coming in to save us. They're not going to come in and save us. They'll just make us borrow from the next year. They'll make us borrow from the next year. It's kind of like a payday loan. You never will catch up. They're going to make you pay and make you borrow from the next school year. Yeah, that's what, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think I've already addressed this one, that $1.8 million that the Ohio Department of Education is requiring that we give them a reduction plan by March 31st of how we'll get there. So
If you remember from a few slides ago, we were still at the end of fiscal year 24, we were still right at about 0 or so. And so we have two phases. So we have regardless of levy passage to try to increase that end of the 5-year forecast, and then if the March levy does not pass. So let's go with the phase 3 reductions. So eliminating STEM, which is our gifted pull-out program at BCI, that's our 3 to 5 building. None of the other buildings have that particular program. So they're the only building that still has that program. Kids will still be served in their classrooms. Fulfill their gifted WEPs. However, it is not a state requirement. It's only a state requirement to identify gifted kids. It's not a state requirement to serve gifted students. So we are serving all of our gifted students, but that is not a state requirement. The state requirement is only to identify gifted students. World language offerings at the middle school. Again, so those students will be able to take all those languages, French and Spanish at the high school, and then also one high school English position will be eliminated. We're also raising sports participation fees from $150 to $200, and also $50 of the marching band color guard, winter guard IPE, which is indoor percussion. Fees will go towards the district budget. Right now, none of the marching band, color guard, winter guard IPE fees go to the district budget. Remember, from recommendation number 3, we were about $100,000 more than our primary peer school districts. So again, we're trying to bridge that gap there of increasing those fees. and also increasing all-day, everyday kindergarten tuition by $900 a year. And then 2 open positions are going to be filled by involuntary transfers. Summer of 2020, we're not going to resurface any of our lots or do any landscape mulching. We're still going to do a playground mulch because that's a safety issue, but no landscape mulch. And we're going to delay purchase of Chromebooks for 1 year, which was also one of the recommendations in the audit, was to push that off 1 more year. Even though we are right on the edge of, because again, Google only supports those particular Chromebooks for so much length of time, and so we're pushing it right up to the month that they actually expired. So again, we have to buy Chromebooks because the state, again, this isn't our unfunded mandate, but here's another unfunded mandate, is they require us to, through all of our testing is online, the state testing is online, they require us to do those on our own devices because it's a secure browser. But we can't put a secure browser on a private device. So even if we went to bring your own device, we'd have to have a large number of Chromebooks anyways in order to test our students. Because when you test against a secure browser, which means that you can't go to Google, you can't Google it. It locks down your computer. So, but it has to be our computer to be able to do that. And so that leads us to about $287,000 in 2021, and reduction in 21-22 is $460,000. Again, those are minimums. We're going to continue to look for ways to reduce. Again, those are regardless of levy passage so that we can build up that end of that 5-year forecast, build up that reserve a little bit more. So here are the reductions if the levy does not pass. Again, eliminate 1 social studies teacher at the high school. We're going to contract with the Greene County Career Center for the biomed program. We're going to reduce library position to 0.5. We're going to eliminate high school busing. And then we're going to raise the high school participation fees. They're already $200 from the previous phase. We're going to increase those to $300. And then we're going to eliminate 49 paid supplementals and/or athletic positions. So what is a supplemental? A supplemental are these things. So these are clubs, these are activities that kids are involved in, and these are not going to happen next year if the levy does not pass. So that's science fair, academic team advisors, Eagle Excellence, class officers for freshmen, sophomore, and seniors, Eagle Excellence, Key Club, Tech STEM advisor, again, I'm not going to name all these, jazz band director, pep band director, a lot of chair people in there for the different departments. And then here are the paid supplementals for athletics. So you can see those. It's kind of a cross-section of all the particular sports. Again, all this is online also in our levy information section. This entire presentation, actually not this one, the one from the board meeting is all in there, but probably 98% of it is the same. The middle school, if this levy does not pass, no middle school keyboarding, no 6th grade art, library 0.5, we're going to reduce transportation to the state minimum 2-mile requirement. Again, state minimum is 2 miles, no high school busing. That's the state minimum. So we're doing 2 mile at BCI in the middle school because they're on the same bus routes, and eliminate 25 paid supplementals. So you see those football, track, camp, current advisors, tech STEM, math pentathlon, the play, the musical, student council, National Honor Society. So those are all things that are not going to happen next year. Bell Creek, no art STEM classes. Reduced transportation state minimum, library position reduced to 0.5. 6 paid supplementals, math pentathlon, student council, chairpersons. Stephen Bell, no art or STEM. Library position reduced to 0.5. So essentially, we have 4 buildings that have librarians. 2 people are going to cover those 4 buildings. So at Stephen Bell and BCI, they're still going to get their library time. However, there's not going to be any additional time that kids will be able to go down there, or it's going to be very challenging for those librarians to be able to restock the books and to do all those behind-the-scenes things that take a lot of time. 5 paid supplementals eliminated. You see those. And then here are the district level reductions. Reduced staff development. Delay curriculum adoptions in math and science, and we sorely need the adoptions in math and science, but we're going to push those off a year. Non-renewed select electronic subscriptions, and also non-renewed contract with communications consultant Allerton Hill. So again, the feedback after the May levy last year is, you guys didn't do a very good job communicating with us. That was the feedback. So we thought it was prudent to go out and get professional help with that, to better communicate with our community. So again, this is not just Facebook. They work with me, they work with the administrative staff to craft messages, to go over things, to put things together. That's what a communications consultant does. They help you communicate with your public. And again, other districts around here that have an actual communications person. So we don't have anybody else that does PR. We don't have anybody else that does that. But these districts have a specific communications person in their district as a hired employee. Beaver Creek, Centerville, Xenia, Fairborn, Oakwood. They all have a person on staff in order, or for a communications person. So again, in today's day and age of instant communication and that whole realm of social media and also with news media and so forth, and we've had a lot of news media with us, starting back in August. So there's been a high need for effective communications with the community. So that's something that we are working very hard on. And so if you add all those together, you have reduction in force. Essentially, that's another term. That's a term that we use for laying off. Okay? So 3 certified teachers, 4 classified staff, and that is high school ELA teachers, social studies, science, and 4 bus drivers. That's who those 7 people are. Involuntary transfers. Those are people who are going to fill internally in internal positions. Those are 4 certified teachers, high school art, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, BCI reading, and 2 librarians. So those people will be involuntary transferred. So again, just a total reduction or totals here. So if that's 13, 85 paid supplementals. So that amounts to 1.174 in 2021 and 21-22, 1.2. So if you remember from a few slides ago, that $1.893 million is the deficit that we're in, not next fiscal year, the fiscal year after. That's the one ODE wants us to have a plan for to reduce by. So we're reducing by $2.4 million because that will leave us with about $500,000 in reserve. Again, we have a $30 million budget. They recommend having $3 million in reserve. We'll have $500,000 in reserve. Again, that's what those 2 things say right there. And we'll continue to look for other cost-saving measures. Again, a lot of good information on our website. There's the communications piece, there's the levy information piece. All of this, this particular presentation is not on there yet, obviously, but last Thursday's is already on there, along with the press release that went out to the press. And there's more information. We do have a call through the superintendent on February 27th. Again, that's something that I've been doing, and a board member is there a vast majority of the time also. We're at Winans or Bellhop twice a month since July. So again, that's another way that community members of being able to communicate with them in an informal manner, Q&A. So we've been doing that since July. In July, we had a fair amount of people at those sessions, and then by November, it's about 2 people that came to those. So again, I'll be there to be able to answer questions with people, but that's a good way to do that also. And also tomorrow is the registration to register to vote deadline, so that is tomorrow, so don't forget that if you have not registered to vote yet, it's not too late. All right, that's the presentation. Now we're going to go to, do you have anything else to say, Kevin?
No.
Okay. All right, we're going to move to the table here, and then we'll do Q&A.
How much time do you want to spend on questions? There are a lot of them here.
We'll stay as long as all those questions on this information.
Okay, well, I need to go to bed.
Okay, then 8:30ish, I don't know. We'll shoot for 8:30? We'll shoot for 8:30? Okay. Not midnight, all right.
So I have a question though, Doug. You guys got these questions prior to tonight, and I know you guys all have copies of them. Do you want to start there and just go with them, or do you want me to read each one to you? I figure since these were submitted first, we'll go with these first. Is that a yes or a no?
We can do those first.
Do these first?
Sure.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
That one is not. They gave me the one that doesn't work. Okay, first question. Concerning the Phase 3 reductions, what are the current itemized costs of these programs? STEP, comma, languages, etc. And how much will cutting these academic programs save?
Again, those will cut in 2021. We'll save about $287,000, and 21-22 they're going to save about $460,000. So some of those are actually within Phase 2 reductions, but let's see here. So again, the STEP world language offerings, one high school position. So again, like the world language, that actually is in the Phase 2 reduction. Phase 2, so that one's probably saving like 150 grand or so, and the race participation fees is probably about 50 to 60 for the participation fees. Increase all day, every day kindergarten, that's about 90,000. Lot resurfacing, no landscape mulch, that's about 50 or 60 grand. And then the Chromebooks is about $250,000.
Okay.
But the Chromebooks isn't really a cutback, that's putting off the purchase of them for 1 year. Delay purchase.
So there are approximately 850 students in the Bellbrook school system. When I attended school, grades K through 12 were in the same school. Since there is ample room in other schools to allow for downsizing, why isn't it an option to put grades 4 through 8 in the same school and close schools to cut budget?
Yeah, correction, we have about 2,850, not 850. And so we have about 250 kids in a grade level. So even though we do have a little room in each of the buildings, we don't have enough room to put, an additional 250 to 400 kids in a building. We'd be really overloaded at that point. So we do have a little room, we don't have that much room.
In the next union contract, what will be cut? Example, bonus to retire.
Well, since we don't want to have an unfair labor practice, can't answer a question like that. Best we can say is, we have all this knowledge and we will negotiate a contract. We've already got a contract in place for next year, 0. So for next year we'll sit down and negotiate, and we'll realize the situation we're in, and both sides will go from there.
I have 3 questions here that kind of look like they're all sort of the same.
Yeah, again, just to go along with that, again, we haven't negotiated a contract beyond next year, and so in the recommendation, the auditor's recommendation, what was it, like $189,000 or that they were recommending in that one particular recommendation. One of that is $158,000 of that is merit pay. So if the school district gets an A or a B, it's like a performance bonus. So they get a 1% stipend essentially for that. But their raise, they have a 2% raise. So that's only a one-time thing. It does not, or yearly, it doesn't get put onto the base. But that is, that's a performance bonus. So if you want, it's kind of a, you want your school district to do really well and those people to be motivated, that's a piece that that was put in the contract a few years ago. But we don't have a contract beyond next year, so we really can't speak on what that contract says. Like Kevin said, we'll use all this information and knowledge, and we'll all get together.
But again, as we said, next year we don't have that. We don't have merit pay. We don't have any pay raise. No step.
Okay, so,
If I could follow up with one that ties into this that we had, and that's the incentive for attendance, and that's a cost saving to the district because you don't have to hire a substitute teacher. If you're able to avoid doing that, then you're saving more money than the incentive pays. So that's a cost saving measure as well.
These next three questions all involve Allerton Hill. Why did the school board hire and sign an expensive contract with the PR firm Allerton Hill when they knew their 5-year forecasting reports that the budget would be in the red? I'm going to read the next two. Since this wasn't discussed in a public meeting as per Ohio sunshine laws, who interviewed and picked the PR firm Allerton Hill? Were the firms also interviewed, since this is such an expensive item? Were all board members involved in this important decision and discussion? Why wasn't the contract with PR firm Allerton Hill in the first set of budget cuts? And why aren't they going to make this cut if the levy passes next month, knowing they will still financial issues?
Again, I talked a little bit about this anyway, in when I was up there with the whole presentation, is that, again, the feedback after the last levy is that there wasn't very good communication with the school. The school district did not communicate very well with the community. So it needs to do a better job of that. So bringing in professionals to be able to help us do that and be able to communicate better with our community, to me, is a critical need. Who hired those people? The board gives me, the superintendent, the power to hire anybody in the entire school district. So I'm in charge of that. So I get to choose that, along with the team. However, I have that particular power to hire people within the school district. The board does recommend or does actually approve personnel. But purchase services or contracts with other companies, that is something that I can sign off on.
Okay. As the current contracts with the teachers and support staff expire in May of this year, what is being done to help cut costs for benefits to help reduce the budget? I know that you cannot discuss negotiations publicly. However, is the board pushing to cut benefits to save money?
It actually doesn't expire until a year from May. Normally, it was going to expire in May. We got an agreement for a 1-year extension at 0% pay freeze. Was the last part of that? Oh yeah, I just would say.
Is the board pushing to cut benefits?
I would just say we're looking at everything, but like they said, we can't really discuss the negotiations. But we don't want to be in this situation any more than anybody else does, so we're going to do our best to try to look at everything like that.
Again, along with that, I just want to say that both unions have been extremely cooperative, have been extremely team players. They get it, they get the big picture. They have worked collaboratively with us. We have a very good relationship with our unions. So, we're very appreciative of the sacrifices that they are making on behalf of the students in the district. When we go into negotiations, we're all there for the best interest of the school district, and that's what they've done in the past. And I wouldn't expect anything differently in the future.
What will the effect of the 2020 property revaluation on cost to homeowners? What will be the effect?
David Graham leave?
Did.
Yeah, that's a good question.
That was one for Dave. There are two questions here that are kind of similar. If the levy passes, will any of the cut programs from phases 1 through 3 be reinstated? And on the same line, the cuts listed such as National Junior Honor Society, Camp Curran, musicals, plays, etc. Are these programs being cut along with the teacher who supplements?
Say the first part again.
What are we going to reinstate?
Oh, I think, hopefully we have the same answer on this one. I hate to say a definite, but the goal is to not reinstate any of them, because as you can see with the forecast, even with the levy passing, we don't have a lot of money at the end of that period. Now, I don't want to say it's definitely 100% what we're going to do, because I know how that works. 2 years from now, we reinstate one thing, and somebody remembers that we said we weren't going to reinstate anything, then we're in trouble. But the plan is not to.
The plan is not to reinstate those because, again, those are the savings that we carry over from year to year. So if you reinstate those, then you lose that saving in that next year. So that if you bring those things back, then you lose those savings. Now, never ever, 10 years down the road, financial situation changes or whatever the year is, okay, but there's no immediate plans to bring those things back. Oh, the supplemental, so is the teacher along with that supplemental not there anymore? So again, the supplemental is like an extra contract. So the teacher is a teacher and that's different, that's totally separate than if they do a supplemental. So if the supplemental is eliminated, that has no impact on their classroom or their contract as a teacher or a staff member. Those are two separate things. So you need school advisors to be able to go to Camp Curran. So there's no school advisors. So correct. There's no Camp Curran. DC trip is not an extra stipend for people. Yeah. That's totally funded by the students. Yeah. As I'm an 8th grader this year. Paying for that right now. Yes. Next question, yeah?
School officials and staff make it a point to let you know the grades the school system receive on their yearly report card, overall a B if I'm not mistaken. Isn't it true that in student preparedness, Bellbrook earns a C, or the grade of average, and there are schools within the area with a smaller budget that earn a higher grade?
So again, so the state report card is with any type of those grades, it's a little more complicated than what that grade actually pertains to. So the C is a year's worth of growth, and that's where you should be. I know sometimes we have a negative connotation with a C. A C is where you need to be. However, when I looked at other school districts around us, Wayne had a C, Centerville had a C, Oakwood has an A, but Beaver Creek has a B. So I wouldn't say all those school districts are lower or smaller budget than us. Centerville, Beaver Creek, Oakwood all have a bigger budget than us. But again, those are all based on ACT scores and AP scores. So when you say prepared for success, it's a very tight window of what that really means. But yeah, that's that one.
Can the board members discuss how or when they had a work session to determine these cuts? If a work session did not happen, why not?
All right, so as I said earlier, the superintendent is in charge of the final recommendations of the school board. However, it is up to the superintendent along with the district and building administrators. We worked for months, for weeks, on trying to put together what phase 3 and phase 4 reductions were. So we worked a long time for that, and prior to last Thursday's meeting, the board members did know that information, and as they had questions, we discussed and talked about those. But those are Kevin and I's recommendations to the board. And so the board can say, yes, we want that, no, we don't want that, yes, we're going to vote for that, no, we're not going to vote for that. But it is ultimately the superintendent's responsibility to staff the school district, and then I make those recommendations to the Board of Education.
The other part of that is that there are a lot of things contained in these reductions that you can't talk about in public session, like people's jobs and things like that, personnel decisions. So.
Okay, so these two questions are similar as well. When will the school board start trying to restore the trust of the community by having public work sessions so that we can trust you to use our tax dollars responsibly? And along the same line, would you be willing to hold a town hall meeting so both sides can speak? If not, why?
In January and in December, we held, I think, 5 additional special meetings. A work session is the same as a special meeting, and we had 5 of them in December, 5 special meetings in December and January, including, the interviewing and so forth. But some were public, full public sessions for the whole time. Some were work sessions to go into executive session to interview candidates for a school board member position. But we've had several, well, two additional ones for sure in the month of January.
So again, we're having a public meeting tonight. I had a public meeting on February 3rd. We've had 2 coffee with the superintendents per month since June, except December. We did not have coffee with the superintendent in December. But July through January, actually through February, we've had essentially public Q&A. You can come in and we can talk in an informal manner, and or you can come in and set up a meeting with Kevin and I, or David, or the other board members. Just today, I had a meeting with a concerned citizen who had some questions, and we sat down and talked for an hour. So any of those ways and options, people can come in and talk, or, like I said, we have a community meeting like this. We've had 2 of them, so.
Would you be willing to help hold a public meeting and let the other side come in so that we can get an overall picture? And if you oppose and you don't want to do it, why?
Okay, well, that's what we're doing tonight. So we have brought in the Dayton Mediation Center. They are facilitating this meeting. We have Q&A. Anybody can ask a question. You could ask a question online for about the past week and a half, or you can ask questions tonight. So if you're trying to get information to make a knowledgeable decision, you're more than welcome to ask any question that you want. And the Dayton Mediation Center, who has no dog in this fight, kind of like David Graham, has no dog in this fight, is going through all those questions, and we are answering those questions. So, okay, can we continue? I'd be more than happy to talk to you afterwards, sir, because if I let
So
you,
you guys are
then
going
it's
to
gonna be
stay
everybody else.
after.
Sure, definitely.
Why were early retirement incentive plans not discussed as a way to reduce expenditure? Centerville City School District is one of our neighboring school districts that explored and implemented such plans. Why were they not consulted on such plans, or were they?
Well, sometimes you save money with early retirement incentive plans, and sometimes you don't. We had them here, I've been here 17 years, and we probably had it 15 years at the time I've been here. We've had early retirement incentive plans. But with the change in state teachers' retirement system that Dr. Kozak addressed, people have to work 35 years, so there's not really an effect of that. The other thing is that if we have 5 teachers retiring in a certain year, we're going to pay them $20,000 early retirement incentive, and 4 of them are going to retire regardless. Now we're giving them $20,000 on their way out the door, and that didn't save us anything. Now, if theoretically the way that works is that someone in the past, they could retire after 30 years, they may stay till 35 years and be at the top of the pay scale, but if you give them $20,000 at 30 years, they would leave early, and you would save money by hiring a younger, newer teacher. But we don't know that they weren't going to, leave anyway and take the money on their way out the door. I never really felt like it was a big positive thing in our district. We only have about, 5 retirees a year or something like that, so it's not a big savings. But we don't do it anymore because of the STRS thing. It's now no longer worthwhile.
Again, that's a negotiated item, so it has to be in the contract, and it was in our contract for the first 2 years, but it's not last year, or this year, and next year, it's not in the contract.
Explain the difference between when people leave and they get paid for their sick leave. Because some people treat that as a bonus, and that's not really.
Right. Question was, what's the difference between early retirement incentive and severance pay, which is also a negotiated item where most districts pay 1/4 of your accumulated sick leave days. So if you're an employee that hasn't cost the district in substitutions over the years, you have not wasted sick leave, you've accumulated sick leave to a certain balance. When you retire, then we pay you 1/4 of that. That's severance payment. That's different than the early retirement incentive, which we no longer do. We still do severance payments, but not the ERIs.
And that's typical for all government employees, regardless of the level, schools, municipalities, state and federal.
Not a bonus, severance pay.
I didn't see the PR firm listed as a cut in the auditor's recommendations to help the district save money. If this isn't a recommendation or something the school is willing to cut, does that mean the district is really cutting as many unnecessary expenses as they can?
We've already really addressed that, but again, the recommendations are just that. So their recommendations, the board can take it or leave those recommendations. We can take all of them, we can take none of them, or we can take bits and pieces of them. So they were not a part of the recommendations.
Okay, so they'll remain on payroll.
If the levy does not pass, that is one of the reductions.
If the average employer contributions for Ohio families is 74.46%, then why is Bellbrook-Sugarcreek School District contributing 80%? How much money would be saved if the percentage was changed to 75% employer contribution?
I'm not sure where those figures came from, but I don't know of any school district in the area that's below 80%. I think that 80% where we are is the standard for the board share of medical insurance premiums. That's what when I got here, it was 90%. We reduced it to 85 and to 80, so it's 80 now.
Okay. Has there been discussion about eliminating, regardless if the levy passes or not, the attendance incentive and merit-based pay of 1% for certified staff and $250 for classified? These incentives are great, but not industry standard, and frankly, the district does not have funding for this.
Yeah, we've kind of already answered that one too. That's part of the negotiated agreement. We're going to look at all that stuff when we go into negotiations, as we always do.
How much percentage of the budget deficit are due to state unfunded mandates?
$3.6 million is what we had in our presentation that it cost. I believe that was 2018-19, and that continues to grow, by the way. I mean, those programs just seem to always go up in cost.
Are there parent booster clubs that help to fundraise for capital, new uniforms, et cetera, to avoid major public cost burdens?
I'm just going to say that the only thing that we pay towards extracurricular activities, sports or anything like that, is the salary and the 14% retirement for the advisor or the coach. We don't pay, taxpayers do not pay for uniforms, equipment for the sports teams, or anything like that. That all comes from the athletic department through gate receipts and a number of other areas.
We've got about 10 minutes left until 8:30. May I ask, maybe some people that are still here have a question? We've lost that.
So it's my understanding we're not taking questions except from what's up here.
Oh,
Is that
okay,
correct, gentlemen?
I thought you said you were going to take questions.
Yeah,
We have questions, I mean, we have still questions to answer.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. What percent of costs, net of revenue, do students pay for extracurricular activities which require paid staff and equipment?
Right now, just athletics pay for have a fee. Like if you're in a club or play a musical, there's no fee. Now for band, there's a fee, but but all of that stays within the band budget. None of that, until our phase 3 reductions, are going to the general fund. So there's no fees for to be in a club or activity.
Okay. And it sounded like in the previous question with, about parent booster clubs, that's not something you guys think would be helpful?
Well, again,
Based on what they would
No,
raise
the
money
booster
for?
clubs are very helpful with paying for things, but again, they rely on manpower, they rely on people donating that money, so, they could be very helpful with offsetting that. However, the salaries are coming from the school district. They could be helpful in other things, uniforms or for upgrades to fields or those, extra above and beyond kind of things.
Another little piece to that is just, a lot of people don't realize this, but the school district has no control over booster groups, really. I mean, it's just theoretically a group of parents who'd like to help out the sports team of some kind or something, and they raise money for that, and that's great, but I mean, we can't encourage them.
So they're not related?
Yeah, we can't have them increase their contributions if they don't have the money.
Okay. Since there wasn't a levy committee treasurer in January yet, does that mean that Dr. Kozad interviewed and hired the campaign consultant for the levy committee?
We had a campaign committee, not we, the political action committee had a treasurer months ago, I don't know when, October maybe or something like that, when something like October when he came on as treasurer, so we've had him since then. Dr. Kozad didn't have anything to do with it.
Would you be willing to take a 10% across the board cut to avoid the tax levy and at the same time to keep schools open, not have to make any additional cuts, and not have to terminate any teachers or other staff members?
Well, why not? No, I'm kidding.
So I don't know if that means that you guys should all take a 10% cut in whatever you earn.
I could easily take a 10% cut in mine, that's for sure. But if we're talking about a 10% across the board for teachers, staff, so forth, that's a negotiated kind of thing, and it would be a violation of fair labor laws to be able to just make that across the board, a declaration.
Again, as I had in the presentation, our teachers are already, and support staff are already below the other local areas, so, that would be another huge hit in there, and really that, to me, that, and I don't want to offend the person that asked that question, however, to me, that is just devaluing the educators. When you say, just take a 10% cut, that's just devaluing them and saying, your position, your education in the community is not worthy enough. And so just to ask somebody to take a 10% reduction in what they're making, that's just my opinion. Also,
when you think of a teacher, they went from 10% to 14% that they're paying for STRS in the last few years. They had a 24% increase in their medical insurance premiums, and they're taking a pay freeze. So I think to ask for more in addition to that would really be difficult.
And I think Kevin Price addressed some of this in the board meeting too, that if you take a 10% cut or take a whatever level cut in order to balance your budget, then at some point, because of fixed income from the levies, you're going to need either another levy, more revenue, or additional cuts. And so, if you're asking the teachers to take another cut or the staff to take another cut, eventually you get to the point where we'll only charge you so much to teach you. They'll be doing it for money back to the district. And that's kind of crazy.
In the past year, Sugar Creek Local School District forecasts budget shortfalls. What costs drive this? Are these new surprise costs? And how long has the deficit trend been going on?
The deficit trend has been going on for quite some time, and it's kind of hard to address this. That's maybe the key question. Why, I've been asked that before, why don't we do zero-based budgeting where we spend exactly what we bring in? Well, in this district, because as I said earlier, we don't have an income tax, we have very low state funding, then to get to that point where we would be zero-based budgeting, we'd still have to cut a bunch of stuff over what we've already cut, a lot. And in the past, you know, I guess, as we said, it depends on what you want to fund for your school district, what kind of school district you want to have. You know, you have people that want the lowest property taxes they can get, and the minimum school district, and then you have others that want the exact opposite of that, so it's hard to make one general statement.
And if, one of the things that was shown on the 5-year forecast up here earlier was that at the balance at the end of years, in some years it went down at the end of the years, in other years it went up, because, excuse me, when you first pass a levy, you are going to bring in income that is greater than what you're spending. So you're essentially creating a reserve. And once you get to the point where you are spending the same amount that you're bringing in, the next year you're going to go into a deficit spending scenario. So, you know, when you think of a chart, your expenses go up kind of in a smooth line, and then your revenue comes up in steps. So you're continuing to cross your expense line. When you pass a levy, you're going to be bringing in more revenue than you have expense, and you're essentially putting that away into a surplus, so that when you cross the line coming horizontally, and you're into a deficit spending relationship with your budget, then you have resources available to cover that deficit spending, until you get to the next levy. Because, you know, House Bill, 920, says that we bring in the revenue at a fixed amount, not at a fixed rate, but a fixed amount. And it stays at that amount until you get another levy or some other source of revenue.
And just another thing, you know, the unfunded, underfunded mandates, just from last year to this year, it increased from $600,000. We were about $3 million last year, 2 years ago. It's $3.6 million last year. So those are things, again, we have to do. The state and feds tell us we have to do that, even though we only get 27% funding from the state. They tell us we have to do 100% of those things, but they don't provide the funds for those things. And obviously, the cost of running a school district continues to go up and increase. So a combination of all those things put together is why we're at where we're at.
Okay, so I can combine these two questions.
Okay.
As a community, how do we more forcefully make our voices heard to state legislatures? What's happening with school funding is unfair to schools, families, students, and community members. The current model is not sustainable, never has been, and is fracturing communities all over Ohio. How do we build an effective approach as a community to issue a mandate to our state to fix school funding? And then, just to piggyback on that, here's a note that says, been in Sugarcreek School District for 61 plus years, 4 generations. When is the increasing expenses going to end? We operate a 100-acre farm. I haven't had an increase in my wages go up forever.
Again, how do we more forcefully know or try to inform the state? I would say as you being the constituents in this community, you let your legislators know what you think. Again, the Greene County Superintendents, we meet twice a year with Representative Perales, Senator Hackett, and last time we met with Senator Lehner also. And we continue to bring up unfunded, underfunded mandates. We bring up state funding. We bring up the Ed Choice vouchers, which are also another unfunded drain on school districts. We continue to bring those things up, and I don't want to speak for them. However, so I'll paraphrase, their response essentially, there's not enough people in their party, that'd be the Republican Party in Ohio, that have the political will or wantedness, that's not a word, but they don't want to push these things. Why? Because the right wing of the Conservative Party, they want to privatize public education. That's what they want to do. That's why these Ed Choice vouchers are out there. That's where vouchers of community schools are out there. They want to privatize school districts. The challenge with that is private schools, they aren't under the same accountability as public schools, and they also don't accept every student. If there's a very expensive special ed student, they can just say, no, thank you. We don't want to spend $100,000 on you because you have a nurse that you need every day, just for you. No, thank you. We don't, private school can say that. As a public school, we cannot say that. So I would say you as constituents need to talk to your representatives. When I talk with them and say, if people email, talk to you, they have a blank look at their face. No one's talking to them and saying this to them. A few people are. All right, I know people are raising their hands up here. But not a groundswell. You know, if there's 3 or 4, If there's 100, 200, 300, then they start listening. But you know, the Greene County superintendents, we talk to them quite often, and what they're thinking, and I don't want to put words in their mouth or thoughts in their head, is, well, of course you guys want more money. Of course you want less unfunded mandates. Of course you do. What about your constituents? What do they think? You got to let your voices be heard. But that being said, though, they have very, you know, if you look at it from the state level, what you're asking them to do is to provide more funding to an extremely wealthy community in Ohio. That's what you're asking them to do. And when they look at when all the legislators get in a room, the people that say, I want more money for my wealthiest communities for schools, that doesn't play very well. I mean, looking at it from an Ohio perspective, looking at it from Bellbrook-Sugarcreek's perspective, okay, that's maybe a little different perspective, but looking at it from Ohio perspective, that's a very hard sell to get that politically done in a legislature with people having to vote on those things. I don't know if there's other. And just to add to that, we're going up on March 18th, which is a day after the election. That is State Legislative Day. We went up, Mrs. Kingston, Mrs. Betts, and myself went up last spring. We talked with our state legislators, and we talked to them about these things. So we go up and talk to them. Like I said, Greene County superintendents meet with our legislators twice a year, at least twice a year, and talk with them about this. But again, it's up to the constituents to also have your voice heard. And we're getting close to being
We're done.
past our bedtime. Okay. All right. So if you have other questions, you're more welcome to come up and ask us. Thank you very much for staying long tonight and being informed. Thank you very much.